for average Americans to invest in Africa. Right now, one of the biggest trains of informal investment in Africa is in the diaspora. We talked about it today at the conference this morning. I mean, diaspora remittances, like money that African immigrants are sending home from Western Union or whatever, you know, they now exceed foreign aid for the entire continent. I mean, really, that's just massive when you think about it. But what you're going to see is there's going to be easier ways to invest in Africa, and some of the former informal ways are going to become more formalized. So for example, if you wanted to buy a portfolio of African stocks 10 years ago, I don't know what you'd do. You'd need some friend that worked at some exotic brokerage, where now, you know, we profiled the Nile Fund, which is this US registered mutual fund run by a really smart guy from Uganda who lives in the New York area that does this stuff. And you could go online, literally walk out of this room, go on the Nile Fund, and for $1,000 you have a tailored portfolio of African stocks mixed across countries in Kenya and banks in Nigeria. So there's one example. Even a couple years ago, you know, like treasuries, bonds, like the things that Greece is defaulting on now. Those in the international marketplace, there's like $14 billion in African bonds that were issued over the last just couple years. And PIMCO and like, you know, bond funds that you know now have those in their portfolio. You can access those that didn't exist. Diaspora investment is starting to formalize. There's talk about diaspora bonds, where, you know, some of this investment would go and you can buy bonds and it goes to African entrepreneurs. And the other thing is you also have more investment firms, like Chris can't say a lot, but he's backed by a globally recognized investment firm. And we've started to track some of those firms, and some of them are in New York and in Europe. And what you're going to see is when firms like Chris's do really well, and I'm sure they will, more of those firms are going to open up the gates, and some of them in this community are going to open up the gates to invest in African countries, and it's going to be more known that you can find firms to go invest in African startups. So to round it off, I mean, more FDI, but there's also going to be more ways for average citizens in the United States to invest in Africa in the future.
And one just quick comment on that, Quentin, is that type of question, like does Africa need FDI, is what we're fighting against. Because of course it does. The U.S. takes FDI. Everyone needs FDI. This, again, this special, this putting Africa in a special category where it's not treated like the rest of the world. Yes, inter-African trade is important, but so is FDI.
And one final mind-blowing point. Aubrey and I go really long in the end of the book. You're going to have FDI from Africa to the U.S. It's already started in some very micro levels, but you're not just going to have these metrics in the future that are how much FDI is going in from the U.S. to Africa. There are investors that are queuing up, and they're going to start investing and buying stuff in the U.S. And there's